Good evening, friends. Let's unite in prayer. Almighty and eternal Father, again we come before Thee as Thy children, saying, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be Thy name. Thankful that You have borne to our remembrance the promises, the covenants which were made to us from the beginning. Thankful that You have preserved unto us by Thy grace Thy word as it was unveiled to the prophets through the processes of inspiration, through their spoken contact with Thee, by Thy revelation as You walked in our midst as the embodied Messiah, by the instruction which Thy Holy Spirit has continued to produce as it has guided Thy church and has established the foundation of Thy society. We thank Thee, our Father, that we who are Thy children can say, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be Thy name, that we can be guided by the assurance of Thy promises and by an understanding of Thy universe as You have ruled and controlled it. And so in this hour, as we survey the problems in the particular environment in which You have destined us, and through which we walk, we thank Thee for Thy assurance concerning the outcome of these events, concerning the part that we are to play and what we are to do, for a recognition of all that You have purposed to accomplish as You guide Thy people to bring it to pass. We thank Thee for this mystery of idea, the spiritual force that develops with the understanding in the minds of Thy people that becomes the blueprint of tomorrow. So as we commit ourselves to Thy hand, we pray Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Then we ask it. Amen. We are in the midst of an age which considers itself rather sophisticated. It's advanced so far into the areas in which its technology have guided it that sometimes we are prone to evaluate the universe we see only as it relates to the material substances we've been able to measure and to mold. There are a great number of people that evaluate all the accomplishments of life by how much of the material things men have been able to gather for themselves personally or for their families. And there are men that are working night and day for the sheer purpose of seeing how much they can accumulate to pass down throughout the generations to come. From the same standpoint, they may at times recognize spiritual values. And there are times when these spiritual values have not been as distinct to their thinking as the substances which they've handled with a particular affinity to the development of resources in the world they live in. We're living in such a highly technical society today that every range and every branch of science has within it a whole field of operation requiring a virtual college education for that individual field. We do not today hesitate to say that there is more knowledge being used in the world, and there are more things that have been known by the people who have discovered and who have created the genius of modern technology than have ever been known before. When there is a greater field for discovery because we know more things to look for than ever before. And there are more horizons today before every young person and more horizons before every industry than ever challenged industry in the past or youth as they emerge from college to look into the future. We're not living in the kind of a period or the situations of time in which everything has been explored, everything has been discovered, and there is nothing left. We're on the threshold of space, and we're on the process of the commencement of a new age whose sciences and whose technologies are more distinct and certainly are farther in range than anything which we have previously viewed. And even so, we look out over the planet, and we can well say that people are occupying more of it, but the fact is that still 1/3 of all the land surface of the earth is still unexplored, undeveloped, and still in the area of raw material. It isn't a matter of challenge, it's a matter, my friends, of recognizing what's transpiring in the area we're in. We have discussed from time to time biblical facts about how we arrived here, who we are, and whither are we bound. The world is in turmoil and it's in upheaval, and this we also understand. There are many of us who recognize who we are because we understand the biblical revelation. There are some of us who know more directly the pattern of revelation by spirit and by record. We also have before us the continual work in which God brings the mosaic together, provides the sources of material, finds for us the manuscript, and develops for us the whole mosaic. were it not for spiritual guidance, finding, producing, and adding to the tremendous curricular material, we never could put together the things which God is bringing together in this time. He's doing this everywhere through ministry which He has called for the task and for the purpose. I tell you that except God calls a man to the ministry in this hour, he is merely a professional lecturer that can accomplish little more than entertain people for a short time. And sometimes as I have been listening to some of the ministry, and I've listened to some of the things that some people have to listen to when they go to church, they might as well stay home. They know just as much when they leave as when they came, and they're not so sure they knew what the minister talked about. I listened to one such explanation the other day, a church that's so full of people that they have to have 3 services a day on the same subject on Sunday morning in order to take care of the attendance. Now, I asked one of the people that attended this church, I said, just what did the minister talk about today? Well, he gave a pretty good sermon. How long did he talk? 20 minutes. What happened while you were there? Well, they sang songs, they took the offering, they read the responsive reading, they made the announcements, and the minister talked for 20 minutes, and they sang some beautiful solos. We had some fine music, and we went home, and it was a pretty good service, and there was another crowd waiting to come in, and we went home. I said, what did the minister say? Well, he just kind of preached a sermon, the fellow said. I said, what about? Well, he says, I really don't remember, but it was about being good. Well, I said, was he for it or against it? Well, he agreed with me that on the proposition the minister was for it, and so that was the issue. I saw this same man several weeks later, and I said, you've been to church since I saw you last? Oh, yes. He says, I've been back now 2 Sundays in a row. And I said, what did the preacher talk about last Sunday? Oh, the same thing. He was for being good. Well, that's all right. It's good to make an affirmation like that. I think that it was only this past week that I ran into the minister. I really didn't hurt him. It wasn't with a car. We just came together in a place of business. And I said to this minister in discussion, he had heard about the tape ministry and the things that we were doing, and so generally he was interested in getting into a conversation. And I asked this man, I said, what do you think of the world situation? And he said, well, I think it's all right. I said, you satisfied with it? Well, he said he didn't know, but he says it's really not my field. So I asked the man, I said, what is your field? I said, what do you believe? So he started telling me what he didn't believe. He told me before he got through that he didn't believe in the deity of Jesus, of course. He thought he was a real good man, though, but he was in a Christian church of one of the largest denominations we have. But he didn't think that Jesus was divine. Therefore, I said, you really don't have much faith in his accomplishing anything then in his crucifixion, do you? Well, he says, it's an unfortunate death of a good man, see. I asked him then what he thought that Christ had by anything he accomplished or anything he said that would set men free where they think, or give them any great relief, or put in any peace of mind. Well, he said he was a good philosopher. I asked him concerning what he thought about the background of the Old Testament and its history, what he thought about the patterns of race and the different qualifications, and he said that he didn't pay any attention to the Old Testament. He says that we don't have anything to do with that. I'm only interested in the philosophies of the New Testament. So when I got through with him, I found out that about everything that you and I would think upon, and every source of guidance, and every pattern of inspiration, and he didn't believe in it. So after we got through, he didn't believe in very much, and I didn't know what range of truth there was left. I said, now I want to ask you a question. I said, will you give me an affirmation? What are you for? Oh, he says, I'm for people being good neighbors and living peacefully with one another. And he says, when that's true, you just about summed it up. Well, I know now why he could say it all in 20 minutes. Wasn't anything else to talk about. That was his affirmation. I said, you know what I think you should do? He said, what? I said, I think you should join the Optimist Club. and go down here and go to work in an aircraft plant. I said, you're going to make more money, do more good. Because there's very little left in this Bible you're for. And there's no challenge, and there's no dynamic, and there's no power, and there's no spirit, and there's no future in what you have to talk about. You better let somebody guide you. Now this is one of the problems America faces today. For when I talked to him for a few minutes about the vastness of God's universe and how it was organized, and about the purpose of God in the kingdom and what he had people on earth for, this man didn't know anything about it, never heard about it before. Did you ever read the Bible? Yes, I read it from one end to the other. And I said, you never saw or heard any of these things before? No. Well, that's another problem. It tells you that we have to go through a little more instruction when we give people the 3 R's. They've got to know what they're reading. If they don't know what they're reading, they're just wasting time looking at the letters and the words. This is a big world. And it's filled with a lot of activity, and the activity is not altogether on your side. And that you are a very special people, and you possess a very special mission, and you have a very special capacity. And that what God sent you into the world to do for the world is something the world could not do for itself. It's something that no other peoples outside of your race and the nations which comprise it can do for the world. And you are in a period which God has described way back in the beginning of the time of the records of this book we call the Bible. But if there's any one foundation of surety, it is that there is nothing new under the sun. That in the omniscience of divine purpose, there is nothing that can develop or take place that he has not the solution for and did not know of the course even before it developed. It is because of this that we have a sure word of prophecy. Prophecy operates with a sure word. It comes from 2 processes. Either God declares this is what's going to happen and the prophet records it, or God still speaks to his ministers and tells them what's going to happen. And if they tell you and it happens, you know it was true. There has never been a cessation of the concepts of inspiration. When a movement or an institution operating in the realm of God's kingdom thinks that all revelation ends when they close the book of Revelation in the last chapter, in the last verse, and do not believe that God spiritually continues the processes of illumination to those that have the capacity to respond, or to those which he's called in this relationship of a ministry to God's people, then they will realize that their religion has become defunct with the closing of the last chapter of the book. That if your religion has power, it's a living religion, it's a reliving faith, and it wasn't consummated 2,000 years ago. It's still being produced and constructed. We tell you that you are the people of this book. That there's no climax to this book because it's the continual record of God's people. And you are living in one of the most important periods of Bible times. The reason we can assure you this is so is because predicated upon the things which God unveiled to the prophets, that the great struggle for the earth was going to come at the climax of an age in which the technological developments and achievements of the earth would be at a new peak. That an increase of knowledge and understanding would have gone beyond any previous horizon. An area which also would become quite dangerous because man would have learned now how to take apart the very substances of earth which has been put together. We're not talking about merely melting down the metal and pouring out ingots. We're not referring to merely sawing down the tree and making its planks, but we would learn the very secrets of energy and power until with a ripping explosion that would put a shaft of fire and smoke into the sky and umbrella out like a mushroom. We would learn the tremendous powers of releasing the power and the energy in the atom and in the molecular masses. You say that was in the scripture? Yes, it was in the prophet Joel's writings. It was in the words of Peter, taught by Christ, who was but a fisherman until he became, under the instruction of Christ, the student of a field of theology advanced beyond anything known in the history of our race and the earth. And Peter, in the instructions he'd received, talked about the day when the elements were going to dissolve in fervent heat, and when there would be a great destruction that would burn the fashion of a world order in the destruction that would emerge out of these mushrooms of fire and smoke as man discovered the key to the elements. You've arrived at that period. It never happened, my friends, before since you have been upon the earth. I realize that when I say that, you might say, qualify that statement. I know there have been nuclear wars fought on this planet before. I know there have been nuclear explosions that made isotopes out of substances that would never have been radioactive were it not for this before. I know that out here on Easter Island, the last remnants of a civilization plunged beneath the waters of the Pacific, where great long walls of ancient civilization are still to be found on the ocean floor, where buildings and cities lay beneath the surging waters of the Pacific. I know that there are the isotopes, radioactive materials fused together by the holocaust of nuclear explosions. I know along the west coast of Africa, where one standing looking out across the wastes of the Atlantic Ocean little realize that there are lands that once were upon the top of the waters plunged beneath those surging waters. And along the shores of Africa are the isotopes. There are materials such as we would call trinitite today, fused radioactive green sands, fused by intense atomic explosions. This was not in the creation of a world. This was not a chain reaction to something happening in our solar system as such, because beneath it are the sands, and underneath it are the materials and the rocks, both those that have come in the igneous demonstrations of volcanic upheaval, those that have gone through the processes of the metamorphic patterns of the formation of rock and the sedimentary organizations of the dispersion of materials and of lines of the seed time and the harvest. I'm not talking about some natural factor, but I'm saying on top of wave after wave and year after year of geological evidence of seed time and harvest was granted the radioactive destruction of explosions that had taken place upon the earth, not caused by the sun or any other natural force, but because there was a knowledge turned loose in earth at one time whose destruction enveloped the whole areas of the earth, even societies and civilizations of an ancient time. And so you see, there have been in the period also of Earth's history great holocausts that transpired. And after those holocausts there was mighty silences. There were people that survived in areas around it and migrated and moved. This reaches back also into the pattern of some of the most ancient of Sumerian documents. Even Dr. Budge at the British Museum was able to translate out of the Assyriology room records of the terrible catastrophes, the mighty battles. And you know what they talked about? They said that there were battles in the heavens above, and there was a battle between the great gods Tiamat and Marduk. Among the peoples of ancient India, they talk about the chaos monsters. They talk about the force of the great deities who battled in the sky. And then they talked about the battles in the earth that took place because the serpent established his kingdom here. In China, they referred to it as the dragon. In the book of Revelation, it identifies the fallen archangel by name and then says he was named all of these things. And in the 12th chapter of the book of Revelation, you might not translate here the records that Dr. Budge translated from the plates and the ancient tablets in the Assyrian room of the ancient finds that came out of the cities of ancient Mesopotamia. But you will discover here that there's as much information in one chapter as Dr. Budge worked a third of a lifetime to translate from the records of ancient peoples. And you become aware again of the vast inspiration, the tremendous locked up secrets that are found in this volume. For here in the 12th chapter of the book of Revelation, it tells us about a great war that was fought in space, and how Michael the archangel defeated Lucifer and all of his hosts. And the 12th chapter of Revelation tells us that Lucifer and those that rebelled with him, even out of so-called angelic orders defeated, were cast to earth. When we read this record, then God Almighty unveils to you who be living in this period, or any time in the last 2,000 years that want a complete understanding of what this was all about, these words. The Scripture says, "And there was a war in the heavens. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought with his angels, and the dragon prevailed not, and there was no longer any area that he could hold in the heavens. And that great dragon was cast out." He's called the serpent. He's called by some the devil, others Satan. He deceives now the world, but he was cast into the earth, and all that rebelled with him were cast out also. Now that's a rather terse and complete statement of something that took a good many thousands of years before it was over, and something that affected the earth and is affecting it from that time to this time. Someone says, you don't really believe that, do you, Dr. Swift? Yes, I believe every word of it. If you want to tear something out of a book, don't take it out of Revelation. There's some specific reasons why you don't want to take it out of this book, for this book can take care of itself. For woe unto the person that takes out the dotting of an I or the crossing of a T from this book. For if there was one book that was enveloped in the mystery of the Holy Spirit and its revelation and of its ability to transport a man into the dimensions of spirit and bring him back again and let him write these things in a book, it was the personal attention that Christ gave John when he took him backward and forward through time and out of the dimension in which most men are limited by their present conscious existence, to show him the things of yesterday and the things of tomorrow, and to make it quite clear that John was to unveil this to the spiritual center of God's kingdom, his church, and in turn it was to go to the nations of his kingdom who were a part of this destiny. I realize today that we can be so taken up in the processes of business and the cares of the things that are around us. We are so much a part of the pulsing society and civilization we are in that we sometimes do not evaluate the grand spiritual heritages there are. We sometimes find ourselves separated out of the areas of spiritual power, power that we would call supernatural because it operates on a higher plane of natural law than we have learned how to direct. We have today mastered many areas of physics and of science. We are doing miracles in observation. The lenses of the modern microscope have been superseded by electronic photography that can go many, many times beyond the squaring of the best and highest magnification that we can secure through the natural lens. We thought when we reached high magnification and we're using oil immersion in our microscopes that we were reaching the highest attainable power that the eye could see. But now by the electronic microscope we can go as far into the micro subworlds, the microseums, as we can go to the macroseums of the universe with the electronic telescope. For the findings today of the electronic telescope can so dwarf what we have on Mount Palomar with its 200-inch lens that we are forced to recognize that the whole limitation of the universe is only the instrument with which we can probe it. For I want you to know that there's no perimeter out there on the edge of the universe because we've never found an edge to it. And there's a good reason why we've never found an edge to it. This is hard for your finite minds and a physical body to comprehend, but there has never been a beginning. So someone says there's a beginning in my Bible, like the beginning of the book of Genesis. It says in the beginning God created the heavens and earth. In the beginning of the creation of this solar system, and nothing more nor less. For he was without beginning of days or end of life, was the eternal one, who has never had a beginning and has never had to start, only the things that he was making next, but nothing before it. Now therefore we deal with something that is eternal. In fact, among those who are trying to work in the processes of modern mathematics, they find that they have to throw the world into a circle because they cannot mentally conceive or continue to compute, even when the greatest of our calculators are limitless, endless stretch of space. And so that's one of the reasons why they find it easier to set up a formula with a curve. Because as long as they got a formula with a curve, they can make an oval and have a limitation to it and work inside and outside the curve and always centered around the curve. I want you to know that the universe is centered around a certain spot. And it is centered around a certain person. It's centered around the person who holds all things together by the magnitude of the very power of the energy of the mind and the will, out of which is generated the very substance itself, out of which things are made. Someone said, I can't believe that, for all energy of thought is produced in milliamps of electricity. Well, the whole universe you see is made out of electricity, too. The electrons revolving around the nucleus with its protons, with nuclear cement also that's found in the multiple particles of the now known atom. And yet today everything solid and everything which you do see is not made from what it does appear, but is made out of the cement of will and of mind and of presence of the greatest personality that the universe could know. There's none greater than him and no one before him. And the thing which is important for you to know tonight is though you were wandering in a new sphere, and as the Apostle Paul says in the book of Hebrews, you are strangers and pilgrims in the earth. The one who put this thing together is my Father. And because he is my Father, and because I am his Son, he has made certain commitments which I can claim and which he will put into operation. He has promised me that there is no secret in this universe that I can knock at that he will not open. He has assured us that there is nothing that would be beneficial for us within the structure of Earth that he will not give us the power to adapt that beneficial development in the Earth for us. He has told us that we can seek and it shall be opened up to us, that there is no phase of it where we will not find the answer to which we seek. You say, why is it that in the earth there have been peoples here ages before us, and they didn't probe the secrets of the universe, and they didn't find it out? Some looked at the stars, and that's where it stopped. Others looked at the water around about them, the plants growing, and that's where it stopped. In fact, the greatest areas of agricultural development the world ever knew started with the coming of your race. And you can go back into the annals of antiquity and ancient history, and the agricultural age started with the coming of the white man. No wonder the Scripture looked out over the men and the races, looked out over their cities, their civilizations, their jungles, and their background, and said, behold, there is no Adamite, there is no man. There isn't anybody got a green thumb like you have. You can talk well about how gardens are raised and how things can be done in various parts of the world, but you taught the world what it knows. They may have gone on in some areas of it, but let me show you this. You are the only race on the face of the earth in which 10% of your society can produce more than all the rest of your society can eat and have 100% left over. Someone said, my, what a green thumb the Japanese have. They can produce and grow flowers like nobody else ever grew flowers, but they haven't learned how to produce all the food they want to eat. You say they do a pretty good job when they come over here and plant a garden. They do when they have around them all of the assets and all of the areas of dispersion and use that you have in your own area. We have no question about the abilities of the Oriental mind when guided by that area of vision and development which makes possible his climbing the ladder of attainment. But I want you to know that you take the spark plug of the life and the vitality and the wisdom and the technology and the initiative out of the world, and the world goes retrograde. There isn't any question that we can look over the 7,400 years of the history of the Adamic race, and you can say, my, it's made a lot of progress. Well, there is progress. And then there are sometimes things that we question as to whether they are progress. It's quite obvious that when we arrived here, we had enough to eat. It's quite obvious when we arrived here, we knew who our father was. It's quite obvious when we arrived here, we didn't have any taxes. So we can't altogether say it's been total progress. But I'll tell you what we did do. We arrived here writing a language. We arrived here with the ability for culture. In the first generation we were here, we built architectural wonders. By the third generation, we were producing the type of architecture that had the world agog. By the 8th generation from Adam, we were building the greatest wonders of the world. And we can look back on those generations and look upon Enoch and Job when they went down the land of Egypt and they built the Sphinx and the pyramid in its very act. We can look upon the ancient cities of On, or upon the tracing of the high steps of Asia, and know that wherever the sons and daughters of Adam went, there went with them guidance and wisdom and vision and inspiration. But from the very hour of your arrival, you have been in a continual struggle to survive. This is so much a matter of survival that a doctrine was developed in one of the probing minds of our race, and out of it came the concept of the survival of the fittest. The moment someone started to talk about survival of the fittest, a lot of silly preachers jumped up and down and said, we don't live in that kind of a world. Who told you you don't? You do live in the kind of world where survival of the fittest is still the law. Someone said, that's the law of the jungle. Maybe not. That's the law of life. For I tell you, the man with greater spiritual power, greater mental and intellectual ability, greater spiritual guidance, and greater adaptivity to the universe that God has created is the individual destined to survive. You may think at this moment, because they have outbred us by numbers, because they were more than we were when we arrived, that Asia is more fitted to survive, but you walk in the land of walking death. You walk among people that are ill-fed. You walk among people that for all their numbers they haven't advanced in mental sagacity as it relates to the world they live on. They have never learned to adapt themselves to the earth they live on and reach the standards which are normal and natural with you. You may talk about survival of the fittest and think that the strongest Negro that walks the jungles or climbs the hills of Kilimanjaro is a better physical specimen than we might take the average American to be. And this may be the propaganda of the race mixtures of today, but let me tell you something. That what is developed inside the capacity of your race to think and to know and to understand will more capably provide the processes of survival for them than all the knowledge that this walking savage may possess. If we were going to talk about fitness for survival on the basis of sheer muscle and might, or upon the size of creatures that have stalked the earth, then, my friends, the dinosaurs, the pterodactyls should command the earth and the air. And we should discover that there would be no creatures of earth that could stand up against the strength of these people. But before we had modern ammunition and modern velocities in which to cope with them, before upon the face of the earth there was the hunter with the possessions and the technologies of today, the dinosaur was almost extinct and the pterodactyl was forgotten. Well, there may be a few of them come back. Did you know that? Reports now come out of the deep parts of the jungles of South America a few weeks ago that somebody saw what by the description is the dinosaur. Flying high up over the Mato Grosso towards the Andes was described what looked like pterodactyls. Someone said, do you think they're here? Well, I don't know. They're washed up on the shore the other day of the ocean, a 7,000-pound animal or creature, and they haven't figured out what it is yet or where it's been all this time. So there are a lot of things that could happen. Some of them are trying to say that possibly these creatures were in a state of suspended animation, being frozen in the ice packs of northern glaciers, which having broken off into the sea, melted, and they came out of their suspended animation and took on their life from where that was. We would not argue that point. We'll leave that up for time to establish. Or whether some portion by subterranean upheaval or by earthquake cracked open and let out of some interior abyss of the earth some of the creatures which may be appearing upon it. Don't be surprised, for you're in a climactic period of prophetic destiny, one in which strange events as they occur mark the end of the age and the beginning of a new one. But it is still self-evident that one thing is more essential to survival in the earth than anything else. That is knowledge based on truth. For that knowledge can adapt you not only to survival, but to victorious living in any part of the universe God has created. Now there is something that whether you know it or not, you're adapted for, that a lot of people on earth are not adapted for. Whether you know it or not, you have the capacities to live in any part of God's universe. Or you say, well, we couldn't live in this physical body in any part of God's universe. You may not be able to live in it as you know it now, but you have a celestial body that's with you that can live in any part of God's universe. And there are some things that the Scriptures tell you that you need to know. And one of them is that you not only existed with the Father in the areas of ancient eternity, but you watched vast areas of the creation in this great Milky Way and in the solar system in which you were a part. I think significantly, however, that it is understood that God established a kingdom in the earth when He sent your race into the world. When we quoted the passage in the book of Hebrews that you were strangers and pilgrims in the earth, it is based on the fact that this is what God told Paul when Paul was brought into his presence to renew his memory. One of the most important structures of promise of the Christian faith is that the Holy Spirit of God, which is the charging center of God's intellect, was going to restore to the race of which you were a part the remembrance of things that happened before we walked the earth. Every once in a while someone comes to me and says, Dr. Swift, do you believe in reincarnation? If you're talking about the Asiatic philosophy, no. If you're talking about being incarnated out of celestial realms into a physical body, I believe in it because I'm here. You say, well, how do you know that you ever existed before? Because my name was written in the family record before the earth was framed. And I've already been blessed with spiritual blessings, and God has already told me things that were going to come to pass before the world was framed because I have the record of it in this book. And that fits you, each one of you. You say, I don't remember. No, I know you don't remember. But you know what the Scripture tells me? It tells me here in the book of Hebrews that if you could remember how you got here and where you came, you'd go back. You know, God was pretty smart in not letting you know and remember everything. You're getting pretty close to remembering some things. You're discovering that in your technology, you're starting to move into the areas of the development of crafts such as man has never made before. If I told you 20 years ago that we were going to be making spaceships and flying around, that was even before Buck Rogers was being thought about. If I told you that men would soar around the earth, that we were going to talk about a timetable to the moon, and that great big department stores and other publication companies were already offering prizes, a free trip to the moon and back, you know. Well, you say nobody's ever going to collect on that. Well, you can have my first ticket, I can tell you. But not because we don't believe somebody's going to do it. We're just not so sure they're going to get back. Getting out of here is not so hard. It's getting back. There are a lot of people that have been here only once. This is it. And they spend all their time thinking about how to get out. The other day I listened to a man who was a clergyman who was admonishing Christians on why they should be good. Now, you shouldn't have to admonish people on why you should be good. What we call goodness is just a natural response. It's the way you think. And if you think right, your mind's tuned with God, with the things of His purposes, you should naturally do the things which are good. You may make errors and mistakes, that's human. But my friends, you give assent to that which is true. Now we talk about what this man had to say. He said, he said, the Christian should become so filled with the wisdom and the mysteries of the things which pertain to God, His beauty, and all of the promises of the Scripture, and all kinds of spiritual things which He never defined, that we should become so apart that we just find a place to hide out and let the world just go on in all of its course. Don't interfere with it politically. Don't get involved in anything that creates a disturbance. Try to find some little cozy corner and have a little peace and wait for God to take you out of here before it becomes too hot to stay. And I listened to this clergyman over television, on the radio. Maybe you heard him too. What he was saying was, if ye can get ready now to just leave the nice things that are peaceful, the beautiful things about God, and get ready for a deliverance that will take you out of the world before the whole world is turned over to the devil. The devil's going to conquer it. His Antichrist armies march. The hordes are already at work. They stem from Russia. They sweep through China. And therefore, don't become involved in this. Don't get in any hassle or bother about it. Just get over here in the corner, hide out as long as you can, keep out of sight, and get ready to go. That's what I call an escapist religion. You say, well, isn't that true? No. There's no instructions about how to escape. If the program of God was to get you out of here, He wouldn't have sent you here to start with. He didn't put you down here to crawl in the corner and wait to escape. He put you down here to face the powers of darkness and turn on light, wisdom, and power, and intellect and wisdom, and conquer the darkness. That's the reason why we have so many rascals in politics. Too many people took an escapist religion, and the devil wasn't working at an escapist religion. He was working at a victory. We cite to you that this whole book takes on an entirely new aspect when you follow the words as it relates to your occupancy of the earth of the Most High God. You know, I think that if a lot of people studied what God had to say from Genesis to Revelation, that talk about all the spiritual nothings that they can never put together, they decide God wasn't spiritual and He needed a revival. You say, what do you mean? Because every spiritual force that you find in this book is translated into getting something done in the earth. It's translated into victory for men while they live here. It's translated for living and for power. And then there are mysteries in this book. There are great mysteries. I could stand here and talk to you about documents and records that reach back into antiquity, that go back thousands of years before Moses wrote the Pentateuch. Well, in fact, from Moses back to the time of Adam was quite a few thousand years. And Adam, before Adam had finished his own ministry, was writing books about his experiences. You know, I think Adam was better fitted to talk to most people than most preachers because Adam walked with God. And even though that broke off for a little while, it returned. And Adam knew he'd walked with God before. And Adam wrote things in a book. The book that he wrote was on scrolls of parchment. The scrolls were copied. They were used in the days of early knowledge and wisdom. They were on the ark. Seth wrote. The writings of Enoch, of course, were the most numerous of all the old patriarchs of the Scripture that are available to it. And among these mighty writings of Enoch, we get a little knowledge to bring back to our remembrance the order of our Father's universe. This universe has not necessarily been a trace of peace. Because after the establishment of this area of the universe, when which an archangel rebelled at the birth of your race, there has been a developing hostility among 1/3 of the angels of the Milky Way. Now, they were not mad at God because God wasn't righteous. They couldn't say they were underpaid because there wasn't a lack of anything. They were angry at God because an archangel over them had said, we're going to take over the universe if we can get mad enough. And that was madness. Because you can't be before the beginning. And you're never going to stop the one that made the beginning. Let me tell you this. That we don't have to go into the complexities tonight of all the things that happened, though I have read for hours the conversations in space. You say, what do you mean by that? Because I have my fingers on the manuscripts. And I have my fingers on the records, and I can show you where some of these things were told to Enoch and others were told to others. I can show you where visitors have come to earth to tell men what went on. The organization of heaven, the vastness of it, things which you know and only need to be brought back to your remembrance. How many universes are there anyhow? Oh, you say there's only one. No, there's sub-universes, there's island universes. Even astronomers are beginning to understand that. And far off, remote, in the empty places of the north, there's more universes than we thought, and it's not as dark out there as we once thought it to be. We are most concerned then with something that's so many trillion years of measure by what we used to call light years, that someone said that's too big of room for us to think about. Suppose I tell you then that related to this universe of which we are a part, that in this universe which surrounds the Pleiades and reaches out to the Milky Way and the far-off Orion and into the far distant spaces of the solar system that surrounds your Earth and all of the great areas around it which are set into far, that the Pleiades was the known center of the universe. And those little 7 stars up there contain within the throne seat of Yahweh as he rules over this universe. And he sits in the council of the Elohim. Has it ever occurred to you that when God has a family that they're also going to be gods? What do you think God would have? The offspring of God are gods. I've got a little secret for you tonight. Every last one of you seated in this room were called by the Father Elohim. And that's why it said in the 82nd chapter of the Psalmist, ye are Elohim, and all of you are the children of Yahweh. Not everybody that walks the earth, just the white Adamic race. Oh, you say, well, they don't act like gods. No, they surely don't. That's why the 82nd Psalm was written. God says, my, what's the matter with you, Elohim? Here you are down here in the earth, and you walk like men, you act like men, you're even dying like men. Now rise and act like sons of God. You say, I'd like to. Well, then what are you waiting for? The greatest area of battle with which we were to be faced was the battle to upset the channel of our thinking. For if we thought like the Elohim, we would apply the power that belonged to the Elohim, and we would master the earth, and that quickly. You should by now know that there's no problem in earth that you cannot solve. That isn't one single problem that besets your race that you're worried about the fact that be established concerning the vastness of the numbers of units that we see moving in areas where we do not catch the visibility by the eye. The passage of an astronomical object blots out a far distant star on the photography. It's put upon a sidereal calculator. The 2 plates of the calculator are put together, and suddenly a little bell rings, and they stop everything right there. A calculator comes down, the points come over, and the point of incidence is where a opaque object you didn't see blacked out the light of a star that was even farther away. But the electronic charge, because there was a variation, it rang the bell. Modern technology has built an instrument so far beyond your ability to see with the eye and to discern by looking at the multitude of its specks, by the electronics that you've developed out of a brain of a people that has wisdom and spirit. They didn't do this in Asia. No African did it. Remember that. Now, we don't blame Africans for not making computers. We wouldn't want to use one they made. But I'm going to tell you they didn't find out what you couldn't see. But you found out what you can't see. In fact, today, you have faith. Now, let me point out something to you. You have faith to believe what you can't see because the instrument you made says so. And as long as you've got faith to believe something you can't see, because the instrument you made said so, it stands to reason that you can also believe in something you can't see that gave you power and intelligence enough to make the instrument. Because where did the idea come from? You know, everything has to have its foundation in idea, and idea is energy grouped in form. And that is nothing new under the sun. We point out to you this, out of the panorama of antiquity and out of the yesterdays. We know that in the vastness of this universe that we not only existed in the Pleiades, but we traveled across the vast expanses of time. We moved out over whole areas of the universe, and we went with speeds that many, many times are the square of the speed of sound as we know it. You say, how could that be done? Because we were not faced with the problems of friction, and we were using patterns of law and of science that relate to light and to energy that we haven't learned yet to develop to their fullest extent in the earth. Maybe we couldn't use them here at the present time. You say, how do we know? Because out of the records of the ancient past, the same records which we find that discuss the things that the book of Revelation talks about, that we find mentioned as it relates to personages and beings, it's told that we, the celestial children of God, moved back and forth throughout the universe and beheld the works of our fathers. And we saw the great and mighty forces which were in operation. We saw archangels. In our Milky Way, there's 4. These archangels govern whole areas of the universe. One time we used to think that we had to compute the speed of the velocity of light at 186,000 miles per second. And that this speed of light could be measured by the process of instrumentation to give us the distance to a far distant star on the rate of how fast that light moves per second. And we came out with a measure that said that if you traveled at 186,000 miles a second for a year, that's a light year. And now we find out that isn't even a measure of how far it is out to some of these places, because we are faced with the fact that Mr. Einstein copied that measure to begin with, and it isn't a true one. But that's only the velocity that we're able to prove that light moves through the density of atmosphere down here where there is some. And we don't yet have a proper squaring value of how fast light moves when you get out beyond atmosphere. But we've already proved by instruments which we've projected above the atmosphere that the velocities of light are catalyzed. We've already spun the dials until they no longer register, until they break. The affinity impacts to the things men thought are just in the beginning of development. But there is a certain condition that is most significant. The ideas which you develop to accomplish some of your objectives do not require the figures that some people compute they do. They require a knowledge of the processes. When you bombarded the nucleus, and the velocity which you made was artificially produced by the speed of the cyclotron, by the intensity of the gas, by the shortening of the drive, and you sent in at velocities faster than the speed of light. You sent particles bombarding the nucleus and blew the atom apart. Then after you blew it apart, an unshaved, uncouth, bewhiskered Jew said, I figured it all out for you. He couldn't do it. He couldn't take it apart. He couldn't put it together. And everybody bowed and said, Allah Einstein. You know what we found out tonight? We found out he was wrong. We took the nuclear elements apart without him. I'm going to prove to you something else, too. If he knew how to do it, and those that make up the company around him and known these secrets, they would never have had to steal an atomic secret from America. They'd have gone over to the country whose economy and whose philosophy they were producing, and they'd have made it there without your help. Don't tell me about the superior technology of any people on the face of the earth. If Africa or Asia could produce it, if communist Russia had the technological abilities of their own, they wouldn't send one spy to look over your shoulders to find out how. Yes, but in the vastness of the universe, great crafts swept through the sky. When Enoch wrote upon them, he told us what they looked like. He said he saw great cylinders flying through the air at great velocities. He talked also about great circular objects that went through the air, and Ezekiel makes the same discovery and calls them wheels as though wheels were in wheels, as concentric decks of craft moving through space with portholes, people looking out of it, people riding in them, people moving faster than the light. And when these men arrived, they told what they saw. They came back and wrote about where they'd been. They told about what they discovered in a world which by its knowledge had little knowledge concerning the curvature of the earth, in which many were to still teach clear on up to the beginning of the 14th and 15th century that the world was flat. And Enoch told how he sailed up over the curve of the earth, how he looked down at the mountains, the seas, and the poles, and how he left the earth and went out into space and looked back and saw it like a ball. Yes, before Glenn looked down on the earth, Enoch, thousands of years ago, looked down and called it a ball. But it wasn't until 1492 that we had to rediscover this, and men sailing to the westward proved that the world was round. Had to battle with kings and queens to subsidize it. So you see, again, the wisdom and the knowledge which your race had by experience is quite well established. Isaiah wrote about the circle of the earth, and about how God has a satellite moving around the earth, it tells you in the book of Isaiah, circling the earth. And he has a watcher up there looking down on the earth at all times. Some people say, how do we know? Well, the Scripture says so, and more than that, our own radar has picked up this circling object. We have instruments that know that there's a satellite moving around the earth. It's been moving around it for a long time. And one day, a few years ago, it left its course and went up over New York City, and we sent squadrons of planes in the air to look at it, but it was too big and too high. And we were all disturbed until it went back where it was supposed to. It went down over Australia and hovered over Australia high in the sky. And when Mr. Dulles was alive, he flew down there to see what it was all about, for Melbourne and Sydney were excited about it. And they could see it because it had come down that close. But they had no craft then to reach it. And after Mr. Dulles and the administration down in Australia decided that this wasn't the Russians, because they didn't think the Russians were as smart as this, and they were right, it went away again, back to its spot at the equator. So this happens in your time. And here, way back before there was any instruments to measure it, before we were probing the stratosphere and space ourselves, the Scripture contained the record that God's got a watcher going around up there. You say, what do you need a watcher for? Well, there's a reason for that, too. Just remember that we are told, like flying darts, great cone-like craft swept through the sky, and out from behind them went radiations of light like as of fire. And we're told that Lucifer traveled through his universe on ships of fire. And we're told that angels that formed the great quantities of his legions, when he came into the presence of the Most High, came to the crystal palaces, and came into the presence of the Most High, one sapphire glowing palace of one solid mass of cut stone, so high that there were clouds between the floor and the ceiling formed by atmosphere upon that planet. Enoch described it. And in the description of it we find the records that come even out of ancient Sumer of the palace, the crystal palace that shines like a diamond. Only it's called the Palace of Sapphire. And Lucifer came, his legions and his flights came. And swaggering into the presence of the Most High, an archangel before him, he bowed before the Most High for the ages of yesterday. There came a time when he rebelled against the Most High God. Now I want to tell you this, that we don't have an exact count of how many craft, how many technological, scientific developed instruments that travel through space. Transportation through space and their knowledge and their laws were well perfected, and as far as their celestial beings were concerned and their relationship of this field of energy even to bodies, if they dwelt within that embodying form. We are told by the mysteries unveiled to Enoch that they had a capacity to step up the velocities of the waves of light of which they consisted until their bodies became solid and could be seen, and they could retract that and pass a given point in which it so, and their bodies became invisible, and still they were but a glow of light. If they don't believe that, well, you've got a lot to learn, because I can tell you, you've got a celestial body right now that you can't see, but Almighty God can step up its light until it glows like an aura around every one of you. And this is the only thing the Apostle Paul said he really wanted. He wanted to be enveloped in the glory that he had. He wanted to have this power put on so that he wouldn't die, because the body enveloped in light like that will not taste of death. Do you remember the words of Jesus? You know, it was quite a a unique experience. You know, God can have experience because when He does something that He didn't do before, in a specific time, that's an experience for God, even though He knew He was going to do it. It wasn't, my friends, beyond the great creative initiative of God to carry out the objective program of being born in the same race that He'd begotten in the days of Adam. To emerge as a baby, and yet the fullness of divinity dwelt within the developing child, and still His full-grown spirit, which was the norm behind it all, still held the universe together. But as that child grew, adapted inside this body, the body became that of the youth and then of the young man. The spirit that dwelled within it held the universe together. There was an experience that was new for God, for He had enclosed Himself in the body of a man just like His relatives. He walked the earth, He talked with men, and He drew divine power down for any necessary measure. He made Himself subject to feelings and the emotions that could swell against the structure of life. He could know hunger, He could know pain, for His body was like yours. But His mind could never cease from being the mind of God. It could never cease from drawing all the power that He needed to heal the sick, to raise the dead, to open the eyes of the blind. And I turn tonight to the records of Rome, which were not necessarily for Him, nor were they necessarily hostile against Him. The hostility that was here formed was formed by His enemies from Jerusalem itself. What they were observing, the governors and their reporters telling about the mystery of this man of Galilee. And tonight, the best evidence that I can produce for you of the miracles that were performed at the command of He who could command all things, to whom the universe was obedient, were the records from His so-called opposition in Rome that reported what happened. If I read it from Matthew, from Mark, from Luke, from John, you would believe it. But there might be a skeptical mind which say, this was ghosted up by His disciples after He was gone. But Roman records were printed and recorded by the year, and I have looked and possess in my library copy after copy of Roman records still in Rome to this day. That go back to the days of Tiberius Caesar, for the records of Rome are on file in Rome today. If there's any one contribution that Rome has made to Western society, it's the meticulous exactness with which they kept the records of the emperors of Rome, of all that happened in their provinces. And there's one thing that the emperors of Rome, who having their bookkeepers keep the record, have to testify to. The miracles which are related as being done by the hands of Christ were done by the embodiment of God. Now I turn again. And there's only one thing that Jesus asked for. There's only one thing that is related to Himself we find the body of Christ praying for. Praying to the Spirit that filled Him in the heavens and earth, Agron Numas, great creative Father, cover me again with the glory that I had when I was in Thee before the world was framed. Only thing missing was the light of life, the glory. It was in Him. He wanted it upon Him. The majesty of it was demonstrated upon the Mount of Transfiguration for a few minutes to Peter, James, and John. For one moment the glory came down and enveloped Him, and to His clothes were effulgent with the light. The glory and the majesty of it was so greater than ever eyes of man had beheld before. They wanted to stay there forever. That is one of the most beautiful spectacles in all the record of the experiences of Christ's disciples. Again, only equal with that radiant fire and emanating glory that stood upon the mountain with Christ as He with His disciples told them goodbye and stepped into the radiant cloud which was hiding in the great craft suits that carry Him into the areas of space where He intended to go. Oh, you say, I don't think there was anything in the cloud. Well, if you don't believe there was anything in the cloud, then you have to imagine that two men rode in that cloud on a great powder puff and came out. Because while His disciples stood up there and Christ stepped into the cloud, two men stepped out of the cloud onto the mountain because the mists were touching the earth. And they said, now don't stand staring into this cloud, because just as Christ has gone out to leave, He can come back just like that, and He will. Someone said to me, Dr. Swift, you don't believe in this modern age, the tradition of the religion of Christianity that Christ will come back. I believe in everything that Christ said He could do and would do, because He proved that anything He wanted to do, He could do. I have the evidences of time, the records of antiquity upon our side. I have the evidences of the vision, the inspiration, the ability. I have the evidences of a have-race against a have-not society, of have-nations by have-not nations, based on spirit and wisdom and vision. Someone says evolution, no. If it was evolution, then you did all the evolving in 7,400 years, and the peoples around you haven't evolved in 75,000 or a million. The other day I was talking to a socialist professor out of a modern high school. And this man said, Dr. Swift, he says, the trouble is that you have a racial pride. I says, and I hope a racial self-respect. Well, he said, it's only a matter of environment. He said, if we put the Negroes, the Chinamen, everybody else in the same kind of environment that you and this race has been put in, they'd be as great as we are. I said, well, who was making the environments before we came? What environment did we come into? We can't say we inherited this from the Chinamen or from the Asiatics or the Negroes. We came in and they didn't know. And we came in and we did know, we started to teach, and things started to happen from that time on. There's been more history made in the last 7,400 years as far as knowledge and wisdom in the earth than has occurred in the last 75,000 years before it. That's why you're coming to a terminal point in time and measure. Yes, I listen to the words of Enoch. I stand thrilled by the panorama of what he saw in space, and my mind strangely articulates back to the concepts of remembrances, nostalgically stirred by the things which bring to your remembrance events. The formation again of an idea, the remembrances of things that belong to as a people. For great archangels like Gabriel and Michael, Raphael, stood before the Most High. They commanded corners of the universe, a pulsing universe. No violence, no trouble, no error. Just the great creating, pulsing life and living in its field of knowledge and wisdom and development beyond anything you've yet imagined. And you knew it and watched it. You were utterly apart from any process of thinking other than in the knowledge of how these things were made and how these things were done. I'm told that there was one also, a most brilliant and vital illuminati. He not only loved your father with all of the love that he could give to his father, but he loved you. And when you, the children of the Most High God, became a part of his universe, he possessed a loyalty unto you, though he were an archangel and ruled over millions. He possessed a loyalty to you. And in that hour when Lucifer made the page of history that changed the events for a while, rebelled against the Most High God and locked the whole portion of the universe into a tremendous holocaust of struggle. Did you know that asteroids and planets blew up? Do you know that we've got the debris from one planet that blew up in interstellar war still floating around in space? That's where most of your meteorites and things come from. I could tell you of mysteries revealed from the patterns of the laws of yesterday and out of the heavens, and I can tell you this too. There have been coming and going from earth throughout generations messengers that God has sent to his own people from time to time to not only bring things to their remembrance, but to tell them of things that were relative to the area they live in so that they might remember and know. God has set watchers up and angels to guide, to reach through to those of vision and inspiration that God calls to guide his people, and when it's important, he gets through with the idea. I want you to know that Gabriel was put in command of the craft of God set up for the protection of his kingdom. Now Lucifer had learned a lot of things, and one thing he did learn how things were put together. So on the day he rebelled, he thought that he could isolate and start a process of disintegration, unbalance, and explosion in God's universe. Did your father really stretch and do something about this matter, or did he just say, this is a small matter, I'll delegate it to somebody else? Your father called Gabriel, and he called Michael, Raphael. He said Lucifer had become Shaitan and had turned away from the light. The whole areas of the Milky Way are turned into blackness. The solar systems which he rules over are being told the lie, and he is declaring he is God. And so from this time on, a course of events must take place, for I know what he's about to do. He's going to try to hurl forces against this area inside of the control of this portion of the universe. And so therefore thou must take the ships at thy command, and thou must add to them these processes, the radiancy of light that break and produce all things and take all things apart. Thou must use light whose wavelengths of light and whose vibration are so great that things disintegrate when they come under its impact unless they are in harmony with it. And thus we are told that Enoch was told, the command given unto Gabriel was, Gabriel, gather the fleets and the weapons of light, before whose shining all things fall apart. And Michael turned unto the Most High and said, if we use all the force by which all things fall apart, how then will be accepted the ships upon which we travel? The Father said, that which is in the light and synchronized in the light, lives by the light, will not be injured by the light. We may not be able to explain these words that come out of the antiquities of yesterday, but this we do know, that when Michael went forth from before the throne of God, he commanded 1,000 times 1,000, times 10,000 times 10,000 of these great crafts of light with their streams of fire. Well, you say, well, where did you get that? Well, it's not only in the ancient records of Enoch, but it's even recorded, some of these things, in the ancient Sumerian records that Bud translated. And I can turn right here in the book of Daniel. And Daniel said, yes, there went out from before the throne of God these great streams of light and fire that went out in that hour, 1,000 times 1,000, times 10,000 times 10,000, and thousands of thousands. So you see, Daniel knew. Now what did they do? In the course of what transpired, they caught and rounded up Lucifer and his household. They defeated him planet after planet, solar system after solar system, and after the millenniums that were involved, there was only one solar system to which the broken fleets of Lucifer was heading. What this earth called Uranta, and the solar system that it's a part of. The oldest word, you know, for the earth was Uranta. And as Lucifer made the earth, as well as for a time Mars and Saturn dwelling places, they moved into the orbit of taking over the earth, and still it was not enough. Michael pursued him. Michael's fleets were going to defeat and destroy any power that Lucifer had, and suddenly the Father said, stop, Michael. So how do you know? Because God told Michael, thou shalt stay and leave him complete his cycle of destiny in the earth. So Michael was placed in the outer space surrounding the earth, and the great legions of Michael and his fleet flew round the earth and back and forth in the solar systems. Michael's commands not only manned the great circling ship around the center of the earth, he manned also the areas known as the center of the watchers, for many of these fallen and violent forces in the millenniums that followed were bottled up in the netherworld, and the Calvin systems and watchers were set over them. And this is a part of the record which we haven't the time to go into tonight. Michael was commander of space. Michael was an archangel and your servant, and there's not a one of you in here. So if Michael were to stand on this platform in all his glory, he'd shine brighter than the sun, and there's not a one of you that's not greater than Michael. Did you know that? To which of his angels did he ever say, thou art my son, or the very words of the Spirit, the book of Hebrews? But Michael the archangel was made as an archangel before your family to serve the eternal forever, and he serves you as well. Yes, this mighty angel of great power, this mighty personage of great knowledge and of great wisdom, and who found that one of the leading archangels, like unto himself, now had to be controlled. The very moment that Lucifer got out of adjustment with God, he became inferior to every other archangel. And his power has been waning from that day to this. But his earth power has been accumulating. Now as his earth power was accumulating, the plan of God for the earth advanced. God transplanted the race of his spiritual children to the physical bodies of the Adamic race. And you've been growing ever since. Started out one pair of people. Today you're 1/6 of the world's population. Are you about to give up the field and say we're licked? You think that the nuclear wars that will be fought this time are going to wipe you from the face of the earth? The nuclear wars that were fought before were fought between fallen angels and peoples of earth for the control of the earth. And they almost destroyed the earth they lived on, fighting for it in the past. And I can show you the records of that in the Scripture, and that's another subject. Symbolically, you are the children of the eternal. And in that day that Lucifer crossed one whole force of the universe out, for Michael did, for Lucifer's entrance, and started crowding to earth, he vanquished the powers of Lucifer for all the children of God in time and space. Now over here in the book of Daniel, I can tell you what it says here. It tells this concerning the same thing that is over here in the book revealed in the book of Revelation, about how Michael overthrew Lucifer and defeated him and sent him to earth. Now here in the book of Daniel, in the 12th chapter, at the climax of the age, when the hordes that come out of communism and out of Russia and gather up the pagans of the earth and have one great purpose, to suddenly bring this thing to a head, end the white race, fold it up and destroy it. And these hordes start to come out of the direction of men like the man with fierce countenance who destroys many by peace that we've mentioned. Voices like those of Khrushchev and Shaolin and the eternal fifth column that moves in. Now let me tell you something. If there's any good news that I can add to your present status, because I'm going to tell you, if ever we had a group of knuckleheads at the head of our government, it's now. I don't care whether you're Republican or Democrat. Say, how do you know? This is yesterday's Los Angeles Times. But don't get prejudiced because of the Times if you're a Democrat, because I've got it out of several other papers too. United States to propose tomorrow morning in Geneva the abolition of all national armies. The acceptance of a United Nations police force, a global police force to rule the world. The end of national sovereignty, the end of national armies, the folding into the spiderweb flag, and the determination of the police forces to be made comparative to the numbers of peoples in the countries that are involved. Well, I guess your ratio of a nation of 190 million would give you so many policemen, but what would a nation like 683 million red Chinamen have? By the time the world was governed by this, that Jesus was divine. Therefore, I said, you really don't have much faith in his accomplishing anything then in his crucifixion, do you? Well, he says it's an unfortunate death of a good man, see. I asked him then what he thought that Christ had by anything he accomplished or anything he said that would set men free where they think, or give them any great relief, or put in any peace of mind. Well, he said he was a good philosopher. I asked him concerning what he thought about the background of the Old Testament and its history, what he thought about the patterns of race and the different qualifications, and he said that he didn't pay attention to the Old Testament. He says that we don't have anything to do with that. I'm only interested in the philosophies of the New Testament. So when I got through with him, I found out that about everything that you and I would think upon, and every source of guidance, and every pattern of inspiration, and he didn't believe it. So after we got through, he didn't believe him very much, and I didn't know what range of truth there was left. I said, now I want to ask you a question. I said, will you give me an affirmation? What are you for? Oh, he says, I'm for people being good neighbors and living peacefully with one another. And he says, when that's true, you just about summed it up. Well, I know now why he could say it all in 20 minutes. Wasn't anything else to talk about. That was his affirmation. I said, you know what I think you should do? He said, what? I said, I think you should join the Optimist Club and go down here and go to work in an aircraft plant. I said, you're going to make more money, do more good. Because there's very little left in this Bible you're for. And there's no challenge, and there's no dynamic, and there's no power, and there's no spirit, and there's no future in what you have to talk about. You better let somebody guide you. Now this is one of the problems America faces today. For when I talked to him for a few minutes about the vastness of God's universe and how it was organized, and about the purpose of God and the kingdom and what he had people on earth for, this man didn't know anything about it, never heard about it before. Did you ever read the Bible? Yes, I read it from one end to the other. And I said, you never saw or heard any of these things before? No. Well, that's another problem. It tells you that we have to go through a little more instruction when we give people the 3 R's. They've got to know what they're reading. If they don't know what they're reading, they're just wasting time looking at the letters and the words. Of resources in the world they live in. We're living in such a highly technical society today that every range and every branch of science has within it a whole field of operation requiring a virtual college education for that individual field. We do not today hesitate to say that there is more knowledge being used in the world, and there are more things that have been known by the people who have discovered and who have created the genius of modern technology than have ever been known before. When there is a greater field for discovery because we know more things to look for than ever before. And there are more horizons today before every young person and more horizons before every industry than ever challenged industry in the past or youth as they emerge from college to look into the future. We're not living in the kind of a period or the situations of time in which everything has been explored, everything has been discovered, and there is nothing left. We're on the threshold of space, and we're on the process of the commencement of a new age whose sciences and whose technologies are more distinct and certainly are farther in range than anything which we have previously viewed. And even so, we look out over the planet, and we can well say that people are occupying more of it, but the fact is that still 1/3 of all the land surface of the earth is still unexplored, undeveloped, and still in the area of raw material. It isn't a matter of challenge, it's a matter, my friends, of recognizing what's transpiring in the area we're in. We have discussed from time to time biblical facts about how we arrived here, who we are, and whither are we bound. The world is in turmoil and it's in upheaval, and this we also understand. There are many of us who recognize who we are because we understand the biblical revelation. There are some of us who know more directly the pattern of revelation by spirit and by record. We also have before us the continual work in which God brings the mosaic together, provides the sources of material, defines for us the manuscript, and develops for us the whole mosaic. Were it not for spiritual guidance, finding, producing, and adding to the tremendous curriculum of material, we never could put together the things which God is bringing together in this time. He's doing this everywhere through ministry which He has called for the task and for the purpose. I tell you that except God calls a man to the ministry in this hour, he is merely a professional lecturer that can accomplish little more than entertain people for a short time. And sometimes as I have been listening to some of the ministry, and I've listened to some of the things that some people have to listen to when they go to church, they might as well stay home. They know just as much when they leave. This is a big world, and it's filled with a lot of activity, and the activity is not altogether on your side. And that you are a very special people, and you possess a very special mission, and you have a very special capacity. And that what God sent you into the world to do for the world is something the world could not do for itself. It's something that no other peoples outside of your race and the nations which comprise it can do for the world. And you are in a period which God has described way back in the beginning of the time of the records of this book we call the Bible. What if there's any one foundation of surety, it is that there is nothing new under the sun. That in the omniscience of divine purpose, there is nothing that can develop or take place that He has not the solution for and did not know of the course even before it developed. It is because of this that we have a sure word of prophecy. Prophecy operates with a sure word. It comes from two processes. Either God declares this is what's going to happen and the prophet records it, or God still speaks to His ministers and tells them what's going to happen. And if they tell you and it happens, you know it was true. There has never been a cessation of the concepts of inspiration. When a movement or an institution operating in the realm of God's kingdom thinks that all revelation ends when they close the book of Revelation in the last chapter, in the last verse, and do not believe that God spiritually continues the processes of illumination to those that have the capacity to respond, or to those which He's called in this relationship of a ministry to God's people, then they will realize that their religion has become defunct with the closing of the last chapter of the book. That if your religion has power, it's a living religion, it's a reliving faith, and it wasn't consummated 2,000 years ago. It's still being produced and constructed. We tell you that you are the people of this book. That there's no climax to this book because it's the continual record of God's people. And you are living in one of the most important periods of Bible times. The reason we can assure you this is so is because predicated upon the things which God unveiled to the prophets, that the great struggle for the earth was going to come at the climax of an age in which the technological developments and achievements of the earth would be at a new peak, that an increase of knowledge and understanding would have gone beyond any previous horizon, an area which also would become as when they came and they're not so sure they knew what the minister talked about. I listened to one such explanation the other day, a church that's so full of people that they have to have 3 services a day on the same subject on Sunday morning in order to take care of the attendance. Now, I asked one of the people that attended this church, I said, just what did the minister talk about today? Well, he gave a pretty good sermon. How long did he talk? 20 minutes. What happened while you were there? Well, they sang songs, they took the offering, they read the responsive reading, they made the announcements, and the minister talked for 20 minutes, and they sang some beautiful solos. We had some fine music, and we went home, and it was a pretty good service. And there was another crowd waiting to come in, and we went home. I said, what did the minister say? Well, he just kind of preached a sermon, the fellow said. I said, what about? Well, he says, I really don't remember, but it was about being good. Well, I said, was he for it or against it? Well, he agreed with me that on the proposition the minister was for it, and so that was the issue. I saw this same man several weeks later, and I said, you've been to church since I saw you last? Oh, yes. He says, I've been back now 2 Sundays in a row. And I said, what did the preacher talk about last Sunday? Oh, the same thing. He was for being good. Well, that's all right. It's good to make an affirmation like that. I think that it was only this past week that I ran into the minister. I really didn't hurt him. It wasn't with a car. We just came together in a place of business. And I said to this minister, in discussion, he had heard about the tape ministry and the things that we were doing, and so generally he was interested in getting into a conversation. And I asked this man, I said, what do you think of the world situation? And he said, well, I think it's all right. I said, you're satisfied with it? Well, he said he didn't know, but he said, it's really not my field. So I asked the man, I said, what is your field? I said, what do you believe? So he started telling me what he didn't believe. He told me before he got through that he didn't believe in the deity of Jesus, of course. He thought he was a real good man, though, but he was in a Christian church of one of the largest denominations we have. But he didn't think that... Good evening, friends. Let's unite in prayer. Almighty and eternal Father, again we come before thee as thy children, saying, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thankful that you have borne to our remembrance the promises, the covenants which were made to us from the beginning. Thankful that you have preserved unto us by thy grace thy word as it was unveiled to the prophets through the processes of inspiration, through their spoken contact with thee, by thy revelation as you walked in our midst as the embodied Messiah, by the instruction which thy Holy Spirit has continued to produce as it has guided thy church and has established the foundation of thy society. We thank thee, our Father, that we who are thy children can say, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. That we can be guided by the assurance of thy promises and by an understanding of thy universe as you have ruled and controlled it. And so in this hour, as we survey the problems and the particular environment in which you have destined us, and through which we walk, we thank thee for thy assurance concerning the outcome of these events, concerning the part that we are to play and what we are to do, for a recognition of all that you have purposed to accomplish as you guide thy people to bring it to pass. We thank thee for this mystery of idea, the spiritual force that develops with the understanding in the minds of thy people that becomes the blueprint of tomorrow. So as we commit ourselves to thy hand, we pray thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Then we ask it. Amen. We are in the midst of an age which considers itself rather sophisticated. It's advanced so far into the areas in which its technology have guided it that sometimes we are prone to evaluate the universe we see only as it relates to the material substances we've been able to measure and to mold. There are a great number of people that evaluate all the accomplishments of life by how much of the material things men have been able to gather for themselves personally or for their families. And there are men that are working night and day for the sheer purpose of seeing how much they can accumulate to pass down throughout the generations to come. From the same standpoint, they may at times recognize spiritual values. And there are times when these spiritual values have not been as distinct to their thinking as the substances which they've handled with a particular affinity to the development